Welcome back to the Configit Configuration Lifecycle Management Summit. As we continue our CLM journey, please help me in welcoming our next speaker, Jens Ellebæk, Consulting Offerings Manager on Professional Services at Configit. Jens holds a Master's of Science in Math and IT from the Technical University of Denmark and works as Delivery Offerings Manager and Solution Architect for the last 15 years. Jens will present how you can leverage the data within Configurators to build fast, responsive, and reliable product configurators.
I don't seem to have any sound, but thanks very much, Tom. Do you hear me okay? Seems so.
Yes, we got you.
So, yeah, as Tom just said, then I'll be talking a little bit about how you build product configurators, how you build them to be fast, responsive, and reliable, and thereby exposing your information to your users. I'll take you through a few different topics. First, about talking a little bit about the challenges that occur when you're building product configurators and exposing these to your users, and talk about how ACE helps you mitigate these challenges and solve the problems, and take you into a case story about how one of our customers have done it, and then give you a little bit of an advice on how you can actually get there and what you should be aware of when you're building your own configurators. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about where we fit into the scenario here compared to what Jesper and Laura has talked about so far. So Laura started by talking about ACE model and how you actually work inside the modeling environment to build your applications, to build your product models. And then Jesper talked about how you verify and analyze your product offering within ACE Verify. And I'll now talk about the module called ACE Configure, which is really where you use your APIs to build up what we say is sophisticated product configurators within your own applications. Really what the ACE Configure APIs do is they allow you to access the data that has been authored and verified already in ACE model from any configurator application that you're building. And by utilizing ACE Configure, then you're certain that the data you're relying on is the latest and greatest that has been released from ACE model, but at the same time is also the data that is has already been compiled and therefore is both reliable and has a fast response. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges that are typically happening when you're trying to build up configurators and when you're building and exposing your configurable products to your users. So first of all, size and complexity of product configurations, that is really a massive challenge to most configurator applications. Of course, the more complex your product offering becomes, the more challenges it will impose to the, especially traditional database-driven solutions, but also sequential configurators that will lead to slow responses. Besides that, you often see the scenario where you have a lack of synchronization between your engineering system and your sales systems, which again leads to inaccurate information that you expose to your users on the configurators. Another challenge that we see is the public websites, and public websites that are not automatically updated. It's something that has come on after you've built your sales configurators and you found out, oh, this is a way to expose the data broader. But then you build it into your website and thereby you end up with an application that quite quickly becomes obsolete because the configuration data is outdated. Besides that, public websites as well typically act as sequential configurators, where if you don't pick the options in the right order, then you'll end up with dead ends and thereby it hurts the user experience. And then finally, the third challenge that I would like to focus a little bit on is the scenario where you have multiple users with different backgrounds. It can both be users who are working internally in your organization, but it can also be your end customers who sit at home on their sofa and configuring your products. These people and these users will have different needs and different requirements for what information they need in order to choose the right selections and right options for your product along the way. So how do you make sure that you have the right information available and that you guide the user the best way possible? And the answer to that is really, of course, seen from our perspective, Configit ACE, and with that, the VT technology. because the VT technology and Configurators is really designed for extremely quick validation and verification across multiple extremely large product models, where you can have multiple users sitting and configuring different products that all interact against the same Configurators instance. Besides that, ACE is also, as we have seen in one of the earlier presentations today, built for synchronizing engineering, manufacturing, and sales systems so that we get the right information from these different systems into a single configuration model, and thereby we end up with reliable information that makes it possible for the users that work with the end application to actually make selections and make choices that end up with a product that is both can be designed, that can be sold, and it can be manufactured in the end. And the key bit around this is really that the virtual tabulation guides the user towards the valid solutions, and thereby making sure that the selections made all along the way will be part of a valid product, but also assist the user using conflict resolution along the way in order to guide them the best way possible. And if we just take a little bit more of a view on what virtual tabulation is and what advantages it gives, then it has already been mentioned by Laura and Jesper that once you work with virtual tabulation, then you are compiling the solution space before you release it. And one of the very big advantages with this compilation is, of course, that we have already at that point calculated the overall solutions of this of the product, and therefore we can guide the user much better. That both comes to conflict resolution, as I also said before. When you make a selection, is that consistent with the previous selections you have made? But it also means that you can do selections in any order with no dead ends. So there may be some users who have a need to, who are more interested in the engine of a car, where other users may be more interested in the layout of a car. So they can choose and start in wherever sequence they want to make the choices. Besides that, the compiled approach really also offers this scenario where you can use your configuration knowledge anywhere and at any time. Because you have already done the entire compilation of your solution space, well, then you can take the VT file and entirely take it offline. It doesn't need any connection anymore to the authoring system that you worked in. And again, also because of the pre-compiled solution space, well, then you have a very high and predictable and scalable configuration performance, simply because we have done all the heavy lifting and all the heavy calculations by calculating all the rules. So now what is left is essentially to look up in the table to see what is really the valid solutions based on selections. These VT files, once we work with them, then they end up on the ACE platform as what we call VT packages. So the ACE platform is where we store and contain the VT packages, and the ACE platform will contain multiple versions of these packages. And so as Jesper also showed and verified before, you can actually go in and see the different versions of the packages that you're working with. The VT packages as well can originate from various sources. The standard, the most simple, you can say one is where you have the rule authoring inside ACE model, and you release your packages onto the ACE platform. But as it was also mentioned by Henrik, we both have an integration to SAP where you can take your KMATs and publish them to ACE Configure. And then we have our rules reuse package, which is where you can go in and read data from your legacy system and get that onto the platform. And once you have the data on the platform, then you can expect it directly in ACE Verify, as Jesper also showed before. But what you can also do is you can access them through the ACE Configure APIs. And that's really where we have the interesting parts here. Because what the ACE Configure APIs do is really that is the APIs that allow external applications to inspect, analyze, and interact with the packages on the ACE platform. So through APIs, you can go in directly and look at what is the valid combination of a certain product under a certain number of selections that the user have made. The APIs themselves, they are exposed as just the JSON formatted REST APIs, and that really means that you can use them in any application that you're working with. Besides that, they're stateless. And that really means that it allows you to do very easily scaling of your application. You can have multiple ACE configure instances running to make sure that you give the best possible behavior to the response times to your users. But it also means that you're guaranteed with failover security, because you can have multiple, again, ACE platforms. And it doesn't matter if you hit one ACE platform for one request and another in the next one. Besides that, they work entirely disconnected from ACE model, as I said before. So it's also very suitable for geo-replication, where you can have ACE platforms installed around the world to give the best experience to your users as well. But the key thing is, of course, it ensures the same interpretation of the logic no matter what application calls the configurator APIs at this point. So if you're an ERP system, or if you're a public website calling against the same ACE configure instance, will give you the same great response times and the same response every time. And here on the right side, you just see the different key entry points on the APIs. So we have the packages, we have the configurator, we have the analyze area that Jesper also showed about explain why, and then we have the ability to expose the solution space as APIs as well. The APIs themselves are comes together with the Open API specs, the YAML files, which allow you to go in and build your own proxy against these APIs. And together with a very comprehensive documentation, it's all exposed together with the installers of our software. It is the same APIs that are used independently of how the products are authored. That means if the product comes from SAP, if they come from the rules reuse package, or if they come from ACE model, it's the same APIs you're relying on, and therefore it of course means that you will have less maintenance on your application side. And the APIs themselves, they're versioned. So really what that means is that we do release new versions of the APIs, but they are backwards compatible. So whenever we do a new release of an API, they will typically be supersets of the previous version. Thereby we'll add new functionality, but we'll work very actively to not break any existing capabilities and functionalities of the APIs. And as it also says here, the new capabilities are typically guarded by parameters. So therefore, you'll make sure that your application that you have already built is not going to break when you do a new release of the application. Besides that, all the requests that you see that you make against the ACE configure APIs, they are logged on the ACE platform in the API request log. So you can go in and see which application has accessed the APIs at what time and what was the result of this. And then you can even see here on the right side what was the server time for this certain request. And if we now dive a little bit into the technologies of the APIs themselves, then as I said before, the APIs are JSON-based REST APIs that allow for direct access, HTTP access to the configuration data. So you can use that from any application you're in. Besides that, we have a number of client libraries that are developed in .NET 6. The client libraries really gives you, besides of course a very easy way of hooking up to the ACE configure APIs, it also gives you a number of extension methods that will make it easier to work and interact with both the requests and the responses that are going across to ACE configure, thereby making it simpler to build your application. And the client libraries here, they also come in both an online and offline version. And as I said, they are based on .NET 6, so it allows you to do cross-platform development, for instance, on iOS and Android as well. Besides that, we have a client library in TypeScript, which can be used to build interactive web configurators. So you could build an entire configurator in React, for instance, that use this TypeScript library, and then you could have it all as client-side code that would just hook up against an ACE platform. The APIs that are exposed are protected with API keys. So that also means that whenever you make a request against the API, you need to have the right API key, because otherwise the data would simply not be secured, of course, if you install it on a public website or something like that. So only applications that have the right API keys will be allowed access to the system. And besides the documentation I talked about before, then we also have a very big number of code examples, together with NuGet packages for our client libraries and so on, which is available on GitHub in our Configit SDK. And that's something that every customer and partner can get access to and thereby help them build configurators. But now I promised you a little bit of a case story. And you will already have seen this scenario earlier today because it's the CNH Industrial that Henrik also talked about earlier. But the reason why we keep bringing up CNH is really because they are a customer that covers the entire CLM circle. They have internal users, they have external users, they have public website. They touch upon engineering, manufacturing, sales and service, so the entire CLM wheel. But as you have already seen, they have data that they author in their ERP system and in their PLM system, which is called PRP, that we extract and make available on the ACE platform through ACE Configure. Then besides that, we have the dealer portal, which interacts with the ACE Configure to build up the, to allow the dealers to make configurations and upload these as quotes and orders inside SAP. Besides that, they have internal users who work in an enterprise configurator that again interacts with ACE Configure. Along with the enterprise configurator, we also have product offering analysis, and that actually falls a little bit in line with what Jesper also talked about before with Verify and how do you actually validate your products. So what CNH do is they go in and make a lot of analysis in terms of what is the products that we expose in a certain market and how do we utilize them and work with them for our end customers, and are they actually valid and complete? Do they have the information that they need? Besides that, they have the public website that can generate leads in their dealer system, and they have this offline tablet application that allow them again to generate leads in their dealer portal, and all interacts with the same ACE Configure instance. So if we dive a little bit further into the different configurators and how they're working with it, then what CNH have is different applications and different configurators towards different user groups. So first of all, they have this internally available configurator. This is the one that is exposed both to dealers, but also to their internal users, which is a simple, I would say it's not too flashy. It doesn't have images. It doesn't have a lot of guidance and so on, but it is an extremely verbose UI. It has a lot of details and a lot of information about the product that really assumes that the users know what product they're working on and what choices they should make. There will be a lot of selections in this UI that you would not expose on your public website, for instance. Then they have another application, which is exactly their public website. And it utilizes, of course, the same logic. It exposes the same information, but it also both respects the corporate identity of the company. As you see here, this is the Case IH brand, so it is in red and black, but it also have images to guide the user a little bit more to make it nicer for the user to work with. And then besides that, it actually has a lot of details around the different selections. You can see a lot more text if you look on the screen here on the right that helps and assists the users to make the right choices. And besides that, they're hiding a number of these more technical selections that they don't expect end users being able to choose from. And then finally, they have the iPad. And I went in black. Oh, they have the iPad application, the tablet application that can run both online and offline. That again ensures the configuration models are available in the field and thereby giving the best possible tools for their users to work with. And all of these applications are connected to the same ACE platform, thereby it ensures the latest and most up-to-date configuration logic, meaning if they have changes that needs to go into these products, they can retract, they can make them, do a new release to the ACE platform, and the products will automatically be updated. If we dive a little bit further into it, then as I said, CNH has multiple applications, but with the same configuration models underneath. You could also choose to have just a single application that you then expose in different ways. There can be pros and cons with both steps, but the advantage is really that when you're exposing your configuration models to multiple channels and applications, then of course you need to make sure that your logic is handled in the same way. I also mentioned that earlier, that you really need to make sure that what you expose is the right information at the right time. whenever you release an updated model, then all your configurators need to be able to pick up the new changes directly. If you want to phase out an option because it cannot be sourced, for instance, well, then you need to be able to remove it as quickly as possible, to not needing to pick up the phone and call your customers and say, by the way, this product you bought, we can't deliver that anymore. When you author your data, then you can get a lot of these capabilities directly from the AceConfigure API and within the VT packages. So for instance, what CNH has is multiple different views that they author together with their products that allow them to present only the relevant variables and choices to the given application and the different given users, thereby making sure they don't make the selections for the users overcomplicated. They also utilize properties in the model to control the application behavior. And that's really what we would also call contracts. So where you specify a property on a variable within your modeling environment, and that will then drive how the UI presents that variable. For instance, if you want to say that it should be presented as a radio button, or if you want it to be presented as a dropdown, you can control that directly from the data. Besides that, CNH relies a lot on default values to assist the users with the proposed options, making sure that when the users are working with this, then they don't get overflowed with selections and choices that they may not know anything about, but where CNH knows, well, in 90% of the cases, the users will choose this product instead. And then finally, of course, the guidance to the user. Make sure that you guide your user the right way. And that's really also what CNH really focuses on a lot on. And one thing is, of course, how do you structure your UI itself, but also the conflict resolution. What information does the user require to make a choice between two options that are in conflict? And how do you present that in a very consistent way? That is really the key bits to bear in mind when you're building your configurators. How do you get a single configuration model that can be exposed to many users and that gives them the best possible guidance in the end? And here in the end, I just quickly want to give you, talk to the three key things that I think is important in order to build reliable and fast configurators that give your users the best possible experience. And the first thing is, as it has also been mentioned a number of times earlier in the earlier presentations, and consolidate your data, consolidate the manufacturing, engineering, and sales data within a single configuration model. So thereby you make sure that the products you expose in your configurators is products that can both be designed, that can be sold, and that can be manufactured in the end. You should also make sure that you rely on a single configuration engine. As you have seen here in the previous case with CNH, they rely entirely on AceConfigure. That both simplifies, of course, their system landscape because you only have one application to maintain, but it also makes it easier because you're guaranteed the logic in the different applications will always be interpreted in the same way. If you had different configuration engines between your sales systems and your public websites, for instance, then there will be a significant risk of misalignment between these systems because all configurators are different. So there can be a misinterpretation of the rules and they may deal with the logic in a different way. And at the same time, you'll end up with a need for repetitive work where you either automatically or manually update your website configurators with the new information. And once you do that, of course, you're always falling a step behind compared to your sales models. And then finally, make sure whenever you build your applications that it should be a data-driven application. The logic should be kept in the data that you're working with. Thereby, you will be ensured fast turnarounds on your product changes. You can remove options from your product structures and from your product portfolio directly without needing to do deployments of your applications or to deploy additional things to your system. Whereas if you had your logic and structures embedded in the application, then of course you would need to redeploy your application whenever you make a change to the configuration model. And again, that would mean you would fall behind what you're working with on your sales side. So I think that was what I wanted to talk about and what I had in mind for this presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Jens. One of the questions I've always had is, the VT technology and with Configurator, it offers, as you mentioned, fast performance, fast response times. Out of curiosity, where are the VT files saved?
Yeah, so as I also briefly mentioned earlier, so the VT files will be stored on the ACE platform and will be hosted there. And on the ACE platform, you'll have access to all the different versions of your data, which also really gives you the ability to go back in time. So if you have a customer that made a configuration a year ago and bought a product of you, you can actually go back and see exactly what the product looked at that time and compare it to what would that product look like today.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jens, for your time and for showcasing how you can build fast, powerful, and reliable configurators.